Good evening, welcome to the latest Behind the Tapes produced by TigersPLUS for TigersPLUS members and shared to all by way of helping keep the Speedway fraternity connected and thinking and talking about Speedway during these difficult times. Hope you're all in good health and bearing up, generally speaking, out there. Having this extra time at the moment has allowed us here on TigersPLUS to go back in time and talk to some stars from the past, certainly some former Glasgow riders. I hope you managed to watch the recent outing on Behind the Tapes with Shane Parker, who joined us all the way from his home in Adelaide. Available to watch again via the video section of the TigersPLUS Facebook page if you haven't caught that, and some other videos on there too. To tonight then, and I am absolutely delighted to be joined by a man who flew the flag for Scotland in British Speedway for many years, 22 years in total, and when he hung up his Kevlars in 2013, had done enough to be counted as the second highest all-time point scorer for Glasgow Speedway. Quite something out of a 75-year existence. I'm delighted now to welcome the one and only James Grieves. Good evening, James. Thanks for joining us.
Hi there. Thanks very much for having me.
You're welcome. You're looking fit and well, young man. How are you and the family bearing up during these times?
We're doing all right. We're keeping safe, doing all the things that the government and health officials are telling us to do. So, that's all you can do really. Just want to stay away from this virus.
Tough times, James, and the whole world's been turned upside down, and it won't be lost on you. I know you keep an eye on the Speedway scene generally, and how would James Grieves have coped with all the uncertainty about whether a season was going to start or not?
I think, well, I don't know. It's hard to say. Obviously, I always worked as well as raced Speedway, so I always had an income. So a lot of these riders don't work, so it would probably be different for them, and they've spent a lot of money on their bikes and stuff. And machinery, Kevlars, all that. So they've outlaid a lot of money, and obviously they've not earned any money so far. So if it was me riding this year, I probably wouldn't be too bothered. Do you know what I mean? Really?
Yeah.
I think because I would have a job, hopefully, and I'd be earning money, and I'm one of these people that obviously the government have told us about this pandemic, I'm quite strict with the rules. Me and the family don't do anything stupid. You know what I mean? We're not going down the beach, or we're writing this year off, and we're staying in the house, and we're keeping away from it. We're washing our hands and trying our best to do everything. So I don't think I would. I think my mindset, if I was still riding, would be, I want to stay away from this virus, and I don't want to be going to the Speedway and it's an extra risk of catching it. Do you know what I mean? Because you don't know if you're going to be that person that gets it bad. Do you know what I mean? That would be that is my worry, that if I get it, I get it bad. But I know it is what it is. If you get it, it's a chance you get it. Do you know what I mean? It's a chance.
It's not worth the risk. We've got to manage the risks even more, I guess, in our day-to-day life. Going shopping, etc. has now got more risks than ever before, James. I mean, you're only doing the sensible thing for yourself and your family. James, I mentioned in the introduction, hung up your Kevlars in 2013, which is incredible when you think the time that's passed since then. And is it fair of me to suggest that we actually haven't seen an awful lot of you around the Speedway scene over that period? Presumably that's by intention.
Yes, I kind of fell out of love with Speedway for a wee while. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I've had three kind of moments where I've been in, like when I was helping Nick Morris, and I loved that year. And then I was back out again, and then he asked me to help him when he won the Premier League Riders' Championship at Glasgow, and that was phenomenal. So I've only been going now and then, but I've kind of lost. I don't know what happened, but I kind of lost the kind of love for it. I think a lot of riders do it. A lot of riders don't. Like you look at Charlie McKenna, and there's loads of riders that kind of just disappear from Speedway once they're finished. I don't know if it's the same with all sports or whatever, but a lot of riders just disappear, and and don't go back. And I've been one of those at the moment. I kind of go now and then. I love going to Berwick for some reason. Obviously, I spent a lot of my childhood there because my granny lived down there, and I always go, and with my holiday down there, I always take in Berwick. But I don't know what it is. But I am wanting to. I mean, I am starting to get that bug back again. I mean, I do want to go and kind of be involved. I would like to be involved a wee bit. Do you know what I mean? In some way, I wouldn't like to just finish what I have finished in 2013 and then never be involved ever again. Do you know what I mean?
Listen, it's really good to hear you talk like that, because like you mentioned, Charlie McKenna, some other riders as well around the Scottish or the Glasgow scene, have disappeared, literally. And the world moves on and their lives move on, of course. And Speedway was just perhaps a big chapter in their early lives. But lovely to hear you, James, say out loud and recorded now that you would quite like to be involved.
Well, I think a lot of it's to do with. I know you've seen a lot of things on the internet just now about riders with psychological problems. You know what I mean? And I mean,
mental health issues. Yeah.
Mental health, aye. And I'm not ashamed to say that I've struggled a lot. Do you know what I mean? Not just since my mum passed away last year, but even before that. It's a long, like for me, it was a long time in the sport, and then just to finish. It's quite hard, so I can see how all these other riders suffer. Do you know what I mean? So I would like to come back in it just for my own sanity. Do you know what I mean? And
I can only imagine, James, when you compete professionally as a speedway rider, and perhaps as any professional sportsman, I can only imagine the sort of mental fortitude that you need to have just to keep going. Speedway is a very demanding sport physically, never mind mentally.
Well, definitely. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day with my dad, and I miss the things like when Stuart Dixon used to come up and say, "We need a 5-1 here to win this match," or, do you know what I mean? Going to those tapes, knowing that you need to get a 5-1, and the pressure, and then when you do win that race and get a 5-1, honest to God, you'll never ever get that buzz again. And sometimes it's like what my wife said, it's like nostalgia. You want that, I want that back. And it's just like what I was talking about earlier on, like my childhood at Berwick. I had a great childhood in there with my granny. And sometimes I get a kind of, folks say that you try and remember the good things, but see, when I remember the good things about my holidays down there and like good things about my mum, I get sad about it. For some reason I get, that's meant to make you happy, the good thoughts, but they seem to make me the opposite. I don't know what that is, do you know what I mean? But I don't know.
Well, listen, let's have, we're going to have a gallop, James. You had a 22-year career, and there's I could probably chat to you for 22 hours about most of that. We're going to have a short gallop through some of the key events, I guess, and the key periods in that career. And it seems logical and reasonable to start right at the start. And I was going to ask you about, getting into Speedway back in the, I guess, late 80s, and Glasgow were at Shawfield at that point. So my first question to you is, how did you get involved in terms of learning the skills to race a Speedway bike? And my other question was, who were your favourite riders? You and your dad were Glasgow fans.
Well, obviously, my dad took me, when I was young, he used to take me to, I think he took me to Blantyre, not Craighead Park, the one before. I'm sure I must have been there. But I always remember going to Craighead Park. And I used to stand in the referee's box. There was a wee kind of wooden bit next to it. I always used to stand there. And so I grew up watching Speedway. And my dad loved the Speedway. So he knew, obviously, Kenny and Colin through the Speedway.
Colin Caffrey.
And Colin Caffrey. And, well before that, my dad got me a wee Pooch 50 automatic bike. And that's when we used to go to where Bury Head is just now, down there, when it was just red blaze and like kind of
perfect.
There was like tarmac bits where it was like wee roads and stuff. So my dad used to mark out wee tracks, and we just learned, or I just learned doing it myself back then, with my dad helping me. Nobody used to come down. There was no riders used to come down as when I was 10, 11.
Okay.
So we just done that ourselves, and then we managed to get a Colin and Kenny McKenna built as a 125 speedway bike, and we used to go down there. And my dad made a grader at the back of his 𝗵𝗵𝗴𝗲𝘃, and it used to have a kind of rope on it, and I would stand at the very back of the van holding onto the back doors with the weight on the grader, grading the track.
Very good.
And then back out again. I would just, like, hours every night, I would come home from school waiting for my dad to come in, and I would say to him, can we get out on the bike tonight? Can we get out on the bike tonight? So I was never pushed. I always wanted to do it.
Yep.
And so that was where it basically was. It was my dad, Kenny McKenna built me the bike, and we just went to Braehead.
And did you ever do any, I don't know, training schools at that time, James?
No, not at that time. Not then. When I started going to a training school was when I bought Martin McKenna's bike off him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting to that kind of age, and we had said to Jim Beaton, old Jimmy Beaton, at Shawfield, we asked him if we could get a second half, and old Jimmy, I'll never forget him, he says, you can get a shot at the track, son, but you'll need to help with the harps after the... So I would get my second half, and then I would go into the kind of bit where everybody helped on the dog track, and we would roll up the harps and put them on the trailer.
So you done a real apprenticeship, James Grieves?
Aye. So that was old school. Do you know what I mean? I think I was probably the tail end of the old school kind of way of things. You know what I mean? We were talking the other day about how, or when you see all these things on social media, things are too easy for kids nowadays.
Yeah.
And they don't, you know what I mean? But we'll leave that. It's politics.
That just makes you and I sound like two grumpy old men, James.
I know.
And you know, talking about being an old man, I mean, I'm old enough to remember James Grieves making his first first laps at Shawfield and second halves, and then am I right in saying, was it late '91 or thereabouts? You got a run in the team.
Yes, that was against Edinburgh.
How did that go? I can't remember.
That was the one where I can remember clearly because I've still got the sore knees to date. I mean, that was when I T-boned Freddie Shaw going into the third and fourth bend.
Is that where your friendship started?
Aye, that was one of the. That was one of the. Aye, that was the start of us being rivals. Do you know what I mean? Because we had a few good battles through my career and his career. But I know that was my first. That was my first, probably.
And that must have been, it occurs to me, James, given the sort of modest start, or the way that you started, and not having had any formal tuition, as you've just said, it must have been quite something to suddenly have that opportunity to step into the very team that you supported as a boy.
Well, it was great. It was unbelievable. Do you know what I mean? Especially what you say. I mean, that I never came from like a money background. My parents were just normal working class parents. You know what I mean? I didn't have. I mean, today you see a lot of riders. Even back then, I know a few riders. I won't name them, but they had quite a lot of money and they had 2 bikes. And I remember when I qualified for the under-21 meetings, I had to scrimp and scrape to build a second bike to go to them meetings. But no. It's quite good coming from just a normal background to what I achieved. You know what I mean?
And the Shawfield era, James, it doesn't feel right to ask you just a handful of questions and talk about it for just a few minutes, but that's all we can really manage on this particular interview. But to try and condense the 4 or 5 seasons that you had and the success that you had and the club had between 93, 94 were the standout seasons, of course. My first question to you, when you think back to that period, to that era, what do you instantly recall? Is it the stadium, the crowds, some of your teammates?
Everything like that. When I think about Shawfield, I think about the stadium, all my friends and all my team. It's just everything. I mean, I used to have a great friendship with, obviously, Danny and Les and the late Leslie Muldoon. Do you know what I mean? She was in there when we all used to hang about together. So
It was big. It felt like big time speedway because you mentioned Blantyre, and I followed the Tigers all through the Blantyre years, and they played their part in the club's history and they kept the club alive, and that was the absolute objective of it. But suddenly we landed at Shawfield and we were in this proper looking stadium, and the crowds were bigger and just far more atmosphere, wasn't there?
It was great because after the meetings they used to have a lot of the times they did a lot of social events up in the bar afterwards, and they had like discos and stuff quite regularly. I remember them, me and Stuart McDonald going up and just being Jack the lads and having a, do you know what I mean? It was just that was my era. That was just something that I remember and I love it. Whereas I don't appreciate Ashfield as much, and a lot of people don't. They prefer the older time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think it's because we've experienced the Shawfield days. But where I see a lot of the people that go to Ashfield now, the new people, they'll probably say Glasgow moved in 10 years' time to somewhere else. They'll maybe feel the same. They'll maybe feel, oh, this isn't as good as Ashfield. It was great at Ashfield. And do you know what I mean? I'm just, if you know what I mean, I think Shawfield for me was because I grew up there, I learnt my trade there, and it had special moments there.
Well, you had some big success during some of your formative years. You were a young lad and suddenly thrust into a league and cup double team, James. Pick out some of the. I mean, just do some name dropping. Some of the teammates that you had over that period at Shawfield.
Put
you on the spot.
Well, one that I keep in contact quite regularly with, and he's a great guy, and it's Sean Courtney. He phoned me the other week there to see how I was, and
Good.
Again, I was down at my sister's dropping something off for her because she's shielding, and I was just driving. I was getting to my sister's house and the phone rang and I didn't know the number. I was like, whose number is this? And I don't usually pick up the number. And I answered and it was Stuart McDonald.
Very good.
And I hadn't heard from Stuart for years, and we had a great conversation.
Good.
And we've arranged that next year we're all going to get together and have hopefully a hospitality day at Glasgow.
That would be fantastic. That would be fantastic.
But no, we've got, Nigel Crabtree, David Walsh. I was out with David Walsh, Graham Coleman, Big Fraser Payton. We were out with just last year.
Yeah.
So we keep in contact with David Walsh, Nigel Crabtree, Najee.
Let me help you. You had Mick Powell, Shane Bowes, Steve Lawson.
Yeah,
the list goes on and on.
I only raced with Steve in the 91, 92, and then he retired obviously, and it was the 93, 94 league winning teams I was trying to think there. But Shane wasn't in the league winning team the first time, was he? He was away.
I think Shane had moved on. In 92, yeah. You look back, 75 years Glasgow Tigers are going to be in 2021. You look back at 75 years, we've only won the league title 3 times, and you James, and we'll come on to talk about the third one. You've been involved in all 3 of them. Yes,
aye. I mean that's what Alison Chalmers said to me. She went, I didn't realise that you're probably the most decorated Glasgow rider in history. I kind of thought about it, and I went, well, you could be right there, right?
Do you want to show us one of those decorations?
Aye. Well, obviously you can see my league-winning top here, and that's my medal from 2011.
Hold it up a little bit higher, James, just a little bit. Very nice. 2011. What does it say? You can't make out the lettering on it.
It's Speedway 2011 Premier League winner, Glasgow Tigers, and in the back it's got my name, James Grieves.
Very good. And have you got 3 of them? Did you get medals for the 90s?
I've got the other 2 from 93, 94, but they're up in my loft in my garage.
Very good.
I was going to bring down my pairs winning championship medal trophy, but I thought I was just rubbing it out.
Right, listen, we're going to enough questions from me for now. We're going to pick up some questions from some of our Tigers Plus members, James, and let me fire these at you. So we've got half a dozen or so. The first one comes from Karen Nicholson. Thank you, Karen, for sending in your question. And the question to you, James, is what do you miss most about being retired from Speedway?
Well, I think obviously what I said earlier on. is obviously the adrenaline rush, and like what I said about, like, always remember Stuart Dixon saying to me, "We need a 5-1 or this and that," and it's just that pressure. I miss all that adrenaline. I miss the banter after in the bar. See, I thrived in all that sort of stuff. Just probably like the same most riders do.
Yeah.
Like Shane Parker, he was always up in the bar, do you know what I mean, having a laugh, and I miss all that. I miss all the, what's the word? I'm like
comradeship, that sort of thing.
Aye, yeah. I miss all that, and because once it's gone, it's gone. Even when I go, if I go to Glasgow, sometimes you go in the bar, it's just not the same as coming off from winning a meeting and you're all buzzed up and all the fans are in about you, and there's just something special about that. Honestly, you wouldn't know until you've experienced it.
It sounds like you need to come out of retirement, James.
No, honestly, I've got that. That's what I'm saying. I went through a bit of a rough time, and I was on a downward kind of slope for a long time, and I'm back up there, and I've got a bit of enthusiasm for life again. Do you know what I mean? And so,
well, listen, that kind of prompts a question from Alan Watt. Thanks, Alan, for your question. And Alan's question is: you retired after 22 or 23 years in the sport. While you were still a heavy scorer, which you were, do you have any regrets about that decision? Because you were more than capable when you packed it in, James.
Aye, well, again, I just had that conversation with my dad the other day. We were out in the garden and we were talking, and I says, I could have probably been on a wee bit longer. But he said to me, obviously, it was a sign that you needed, that it was time to retire, and I wasn't keeping well because I had suffered from badly kidney stones, and I had obviously kidneys in there, and they were causing me all sorts of pain, and you don't realise until you've got them. You feel, honest to God, there's something in you just, it's horrendous, honestly. So I wasn't 100%, and when I was riding, I felt lethargic, and it was taking it right out of me.
Okay.
And then obviously when I retired in 2013, that's when I had them properly, when they were coming out, and one gets stuck in my urinary tract, and poisoned my kidney, and I had to get an operation and get a stent and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But I had that kind of forced me to retire because I just wasn't feeling it and all this stuff. And after, see, when I got the kidney stone out, when they went up through my down below, shattered it, honest to God, in 2014, 2015, I was like a new person. It was like, and I'm like,
listen, you deserve to be after involving your down below, James. I tell you, you deserve to be a new person. Let's pick up a question from Doc McManus. Thanks, Doc, for your question. This is one I've been looking forward to asking you, James. How many times did you get fined for fighting? And by the way, Doc says we need some more of that in the sport. How many times did you get fined for fighting, James?
I probably more than 10 times. Easy, do you know what I mean? Honestly.
Is it just your nature, James? Are you just a competitive?
I'm just a hothead and I wind people up.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? And a lot of people know that I used to wind people up coming in. Like, see, when I used to come off the track, and somebody kind of annoyed me on the track. When we come in at Ashfield, we come in the pits gate, and it was the times where you weren't allowed to go back straight into the pits. I would come in, and I would I'll never forget, it was Charlie Geddy. He came in the pits, and then I just cut his nose right off, and I looked over, and I kind of blocked him, and I was revving my bike and staring at him, and I was just trying to get a reaction out of him, and I was wanting. So I was a bit of a shit stirrer, do you know what I mean? But the fans love that. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yes, they do, and it just, I don't know, some other sports stage manage these things, and Speedway used to stage manage it. Sometimes it was stage managed, sometimes it was genuine.
But I've seen something on Facebook through Scott Courtney the other day where the money from fines now go to the benevolent fund, right? So this might be a wee bit controversial, do you know what I mean? But there's other ways that they can make their money. So they're sacrificing the sport a wee bit here because riders don't want to get fined. I know a lot of riders will say, I don't mind getting fined and I'll pay the money, but I would rather have fundraised to earn that money, rather than riders thinking, "Oh, I don't want to do it now because I'll get fined." And do you know what I mean? So it's losing the kind of characters from the Speedway, I think, personally. Do you know what I mean?
Well, listen, I did manage to track down one of those incidents, James, just one of them, which is readily available on YouTube. Let's have a look now back to, I can't remember which year it was, but back to the Shawfield era, and a certain coming together with Mick Poole of Peterborough. Let's have a look now.
Mick Poole's tactical substitute for Oxford Cheetahs. He partners David Smart. They're up against the pairing of Glasgow's pairing Jesper Olsen and James Grieves.
Glasgow ahead by 8 points, 43 to 35, with 3 heats left. The last 2 having been shared, 3 points apiece.
The gate goes up. And it's Jesper Olsen from Mick Poole. Mick Poole now leads down the right side. Jesper Olsen making a strong challenge up the inside. Into the third corner, Jesper Olsen leads. James Grieves comes into third place. David Smart's been disappointing tonight for Oxford. Still Jesper Olsen leads. You never know with Jesper. Mick Poole starting to challenge Jesper Olsen again for first place. James Grieves also not too far behind. Oh, and Jesper starts to lock up. Mick Poole coming down the outside now. And James Grieves, oh, and there's a collision between Grieves and Poole. The red exclusion light goes on. What did you see in that, Hugh?
I think that would have to go down to James Grieves' fault there, and I suspect that the referee will decide that James was the cause of that stoppage and exclude him. In fact, there's no light on yet that I can see.
Personally, I don't think James Grieves touched him. I think he just came off. No, there's a little bit of controversy here. Exchanging a few words, Hugh.
Yes, politely. Yes, we'll say that, will we?
Not so politely now. Oh, and there's a little bit of trouble here, Hugh.
Well, I didn't know Frank Bruno rode for Glasgow.
And a fight breaks out now between Grieves and Mick Poole.
I thought we'd paid to see Speedway and not boxing, Cammy.
Well, in the old days, it used to be quite a common thing. This would happen. Riders would have a little set to. And round 2 might be about to start. Well, pillowcases at dawn.
You and Mick Poole there coming to blows, or having a conversation at least at Shawfield. But the crowd absolutely loved it, James. Just to echo your point, no one got hurt, and the crowd loved it.
That's it. I mean, it's all part of the. It's the same with Robert Eriksson and the German Robert. What was his name? Kevin Walbert.
Yeah.
The one where he knocked me off in the third bend. Folks still talk about that.
It was a talking point then, and as you just said, it's a talking point all these years on. People remember these things.
Aye, but I just feel that I don't know what's going on. I don't know why they like fining people all the time now. Do you know what I mean? They should think, right, okay, it's not that bad. Let them away with it. It's helping the sport. I know the money is going to the benevolent fund. I know that, but
I'm not advocating. I'm not saying that we should do it freely, but at the end of the day, Speedway is a highly intensive, physical and dangerous sport. So of course people are going to get a bit upset now and again.
Aye, definitely. I mean, there was a video on social media the other day, and it was Mick Shearer, where he got excluded for touching the tapes, and he was going mental in the pits, and he was swearing, and it was great. Do you know what I mean? So that sort of stuff, all those kind of characters are dying off now. I mean, you've got to admit there's not many characters left in the sport that'll do stuff like old Jimmy Beaton used to do, run across the track with a rake and Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've got many stories like at Rye House where I went into the referee's box with Stuart Dixon, Michael Max, and Ian Steele and George Stanso, and I pulled the phone off the referee inside his box, and I get fined for that. So Dot's quite right in asking that question. So it probably could be maybe 20 plus. Do you know what I mean?
Well, you heard Dot. A gold star for that question, Dot. Thanks for asking that one. Let's pick up one or two others. Colin Hamilton, who of course a former promoter, co-promoter at Glasgow. Do you remember your only van breakdown on the way to Leicester mid-tour in 2013? What was that all about?
Yes, and I've got the picture. Do you know what? I wish I had my. It's actually on Facebook. The picture of it when I'm on the back of the tow truck. I think we were at Plymouth the night before, and the alternator belt went on my van, and it wasn't far past Plymouth, and by the time the AA got to us, I could have probably have went to Leicester, but I wouldn't have. I would maybe have missed half the meeting, and I made my own decision. I says, just take us up the road. I'm not going to go all the way to Leicester and then miss a few heats and then have to organise to get my van back up the road later on. So I made that decision.
Okay.
Let's just get up the road.
But
that was my only time missing a speedway match whole career
in your
of
whole
breaking
career.
down.
Wow.
And it wasn't an excuse. I mean, I loved Leicester. I got an 15. I was the first away rider to get a 15-point maximum at Leicester.
Yeah, James, that's quite something. You must have lots of little stats like that you've stacked up over the years.
I'm in my memory bank.
And final question for the moment from Ian Adam, who's taken many pictures of you, James. One or two really spectacular ones. Do you feel that youngsters starting out these days are perhaps investing too much money on equipment just to get started?
Yes, far too much money. And I still believe, and my dad still believes, and I don't know if any other rider will believe this, but I think if you learn on a bike that's maybe not so tuned up and not as powerful or not as great, you've got to go out and you've got to work that bike harder and learn the trade on. Like me, my bike was an old 𝗬𝗵𝗆 125, but you had to ride it hard and just get by. Do you know what I mean? Whereas these boys now just get thousands of pounds spent at them on their bikes, and it's just too easy for them. Do you know what I mean? You've got to work. I think you've got to work to achieve and to appreciate things. Do you know what I mean?
No, it makes sense to me, and I'm not sure. It seems to have crept in over the years. You know, I see lots of young riders these days drive into Ashfield, and they've got nice vans, all kitted out, and two bikes, and all the gear.
I look at a lot of the young riders just now, and they've got, as you say, great vans. They've got 2 or 3 bikes, the nicest of 𝗬𝗄𝗄𝗄s, and all the best gear. But do you know what? And when I was riding, I always had really good stuff. Do you know what I mean? But for me, the most important things in my bike or my whole setup wasn't a fancy helmet or 𝗬𝗄𝗄𝗄s or new boots. Mine was like a new clutch, carburetor, and engine. Mm-hmm. That was my main things that I would spend my money on. I couldn't care less if I had an old scabby pair of 𝗬𝗄𝗄𝗄s or had holes in them, because that didn't win me races. Mm-hmm. It was my bike, those kind of 3 main things in my bike with it. So I would always make sure that they were spot on. And as you know, I hardly ever had any breakdowns or anything like that when I was racing neither.
That's true. That's true. Let's talk about the next big chapter in your Speedway career, James. So after Glasgow '95, you and Stuart McDonald, you mentioned him earlier on, both emigrated down south to link up with Wolverhampton in the British League, and a couple of very successful seasons down there too, James. You must look back very fondly on those couple of seasons.
Well, it's funny that this is actually quite funny how you're actually asking me questions that I actually spoke about last week with my dad, and we were talking about how Wolverhampton was just brilliant. Honestly, it was phenomenal. And Chris Van Straten, Peter Adams, and all the riders. Again, it was similar to the Shawfield days, where it was just the fans. It was just great, the whole atmosphere, and you were down close to like Coventry and all that, so me and Stuart stayed down a lot because we had a lot of meetings on the bounds, and we used to go to Coventry and travel about. It was brilliant, and Chris Van Straten and Wolverhampton, they treated us like royalty, honestly, and even the fans. It was just something about, because we were Scottish, they made us feel so welcome, and they thought we were great, you know what I mean? So we just loved it. Me and Stuart absolutely loved it down there.
And Monmore Green, I've only been there once or twice in all those years, but it's quite an impressive place to go to. The crowd are all sort of compacted into the home straight area of the stadium, and they get some pretty good crowds down there. The atmosphere is pretty electric.
I know, it's great. That's what I was saying. The fans are brilliant, and I loved it. Everybody, there was a few girls down there done fan pages for me and Stuart, like fan clubs and all sorts. The fans they just thrive on Wolves. Do you know what I mean? They just love it. It's a well-run club.
And did the track, James? Did the track take a bit of adapting to? Because you moved from Shawfield, which was quite a large track as a home track, to Wolverhampton, which is on the opposite end of the spectrum.
No, I adapted to it quite quick. I loved the first Wolverhampton in 1996. We had basically the whole season there, and I adapted to it quite quick, and I scored some really good points there. Partnered with Ronnie Corey and Peter Calsnick. I was more partnered with they two, and but at the end of the season, Ladbrokes were changing the shape of the dog track, I think it was, or they done something, and we had to move our last meetings to Long Eaton.
Okay.
And we went to Long Eaton to race. I'm sure it was a last few meetings we raced there. I know we done our cup final there at Long Eaton, but no, it was great. Loved it.
And you mentioned Ronnie Corey, you mentioned Peter Carlson, two big names in the sport internationally. But again, you think of some of the other Wolverhampton teammates that you had, and some of the opposition riders that you faced regularly, James, at that time.
Well, you know the old school people like Jimmy Nielsen, Simon Wigg. There's loads. It's like a brain freeze at the moment, do you know what I mean? But when I come off of this, I know that I'll be like off him and him and him. But there's all these kind of names.
Sam Emmerlenko, he was in the
Sam Emmerlenko. Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying Jimmy Nielsen and Simon Wigg, they were riders that were riding for other teams when I was in there kind of era. Do you know what I mean? But when I raced with Wolverhampton, I was still doubling up in 2008, those kind of years. I was still doubling up for them then, and I raced with Ty Woffenden, Freddie Lindgren. They were in the team with me. So Mark Laram, I partnered up with him as well. So I've raced with some pretty good riders. Do you know what I mean? And no blowing my own trumpet, you know what I mean? But I've beaten some really good riders in Wolverhampton, like one of my ones was Thomas Gollob. I'll never forget beating him round there. So no, I've done all right. Do you know what I mean?
That's quite something, James, and you're quite right to remember these standout moments that you had, because you earned that right to get out on track and test yourself against some of those guys. And then you'll be on Wolverhampton with a couple of seasons there, a league and knockout cup win in Wolves colours, and then a couple of years, which I'm just going to describe as your wilderness years, because you ended up at Berwick for maybe half a season, and then on to Armadale with the Monarchs for a season.
Aye. I mean, don't get me wrong, again, Berwick, I loved it. Absolutely loved that half a year there. They were great. The Hope family that they signed me, they were brilliant as well to ride for, and again, the fans. But obviously I moved on to Edinburgh in 1999, and it was probably one of my best years, do you know what I mean, like racing wise, because we basically had like a 6-man Scottish team, and we all got on great. It was a great year, honestly. I know Glasgow and Edinburgh have their like Rangers and Celtic, but I've got to admit I did love the year at Edinburgh. It was brilliant, and it's just a pity we didn't win the league, do you know what I mean, because we were so close to it. But we won the Knockout Cup, and we had some great laughs. I mean, I could probably write a book about some of the stuff that
I think you should.
that's happened. You know what I mean? Like, I think I put on Facebook the other week about sadly when Blair Scott left us. We went to Swindon in the Blunsdon Hotel, and we were in the swimming pool, and Blair came in with big smiles on his face, and he had put soap from the showers into his pockets and come into the jacuzzi, and it started bubbling up. So we all thought, stuff this. We all went and done it. And honest to God, the bubbles were so high, and it was going over the jacuzzi into the actual swimming pool. And they closed it off, and everybody was up in the bar, because the bar was up. You could watch down in it. Everybody was in hysterics. It was just stupid stuff, do you know what I mean? But you remember it, and you can smile about it. And
some harmless fun. And,
that's good.
And then we're galloping on about the year 2000, when the Millennium Bug didn't break anything and the world moved on. And was it inevitable, James, that you would make a return to Glasgow as you did in your testimonial season? Tigers had moved to Ashfield, of course, at this point.
They had moved in 98, wasn't it? In 98?
99, I think it was. 99.
Was it 99? 99, that's when Sanchez raced for them. I do wish, I'm not, a lot of Tigers fans might hate me for this, but I wish I had stayed at Edinburgh for a wee while, for another couple of years. I wish I had stayed, because me and Peter Carr were quite a phenomenal force in there, do you know what I mean? And I think I could have...
You just thinking of your pay packet, James?
Probably. But I loved the track back then. The track was, for me, it was different. The track was totally different, and I loved riding it, and I had some great racing around there. Towards later on in my career, I didn't like it so much. It kind of started getting greasy, and I just couldn't get a great setup. Do you know what I mean? I was riding it all a bit wrong, but no, I wish I had stayed for at least a couple more years. Do you know what I mean?
Interesting. A lot of people who seen Ashfield when it opened, 99, rate the first Ashfield track as being one of the best. Yeah, I can remember lots of really tough, really tight races around the former Ashfield circuit. So Carl Stonehuer and Mickey Powell and some other riders really.
Oh, phenomenal!
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some good racing at that circuit.
Oh, amazing! Do you know what I mean?
And testimonial number 1, 2000. And I remember you managed to wangle the reigning world champion Mark Laram, made a flying visit to Ashfield in October that year.
Well, that's when I raced with him at Wolverhampton. I got to know him and his mechanic, the Scottish guy. What's his name? His brother's a referee.
Norrie Allen.
Norrie Allen. I got to know them really well, and I phoned him up and asked him if he would do it, and he just won the world title, and he came up. And he done it, and he gave us a set of Kevlars, and honest to God, brilliant, absolutely great.
Well, listen, let's have a look at you in action round about that period. This is 2002, I believe, and a Sky-covered meeting. It was the 4-team finals from Blunsdon, Coventry. And here you are in action for Glasgow.
Green for Glasgow. Lee Complin off gate 2 in blue, Sheffield. Gate 3 in yellow and black, it's Newport, Scott Smith. And on the outside in red, Paul Thorpe of the Hull Vikings. And remember, at the end of 16 heats, half the teams go out. The other half go through to the final stages. And it's a good start there for Scott Smith once again. And Lee Complin's made a good start for the Sheffield Tigers. And look at this young man, Lee Complin, who only 10 days ago was taken to hospital with suspected neck and back injuries. He's showing great courage. He's made a good start. And Sheffield could be heading for 3 points here with Newport second, Scott Smith, James Grieves third, Paul Thorpe of Hull battling away. It's a close one, this. And Lee Complin, the 17-year-old, looking good. James Grieves of Glasgow is trying to challenge him. And at the halfway stage of this race, Lee Complin looking good.
He is. He's the sensation of Sheffield at the moment. Round the outside, a big blast here from James Grieves. Complin left a gap down the fence there. Grieves had made a big run. Now Complin's back in second place. Can he just hang on to that, Nigel?
Into the final lap they go, and I can tell you that Scott Smith's going to try and go underneath Lee Complin here. And it's a fascinating battle with Hull at the back. Newport third. Smith has taken Lee Complin on the inside. He'll take him wide. Is Complin going to retake him outside? Grieves the winner, and it's down to second place as well. That was brilliant speedway. And all we can tell you is that Hull's Paul Thorpe was out of that one at the back. And Scott Smith and Lee Complin and James Grieves were in the thick of a real battle there.
At Brandon Stadium, not Blunsdon. Yeah, you were made to work very hard in that particular heat, James. But I included that one just because I felt at that time you were in your pomp. You were sort of middle of your career. You'd had that great season at Edinburgh. You were now an established heat leader.
Team. It was just a good change. I mean, obviously, I think George Stansel was in the team that year.
George would have been there, yeah. Kenny Olsen was in that team, 2002.
Les Collins.
Mickey Powell, I think, was there.
And it was, again, that was a great year, like riding with Les and like Mick Powell, my old teammate from years ago. So there wasn't many, I've got to admit, there wasn't many years that I didn't actually have a good time. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But no, I was, as you say, I was established as a good heat leader, and I was enjoying my racing, but I just didn't believe in myself. Do you know what I mean? Enough. And if I could skip back to 1996, where Wolverhampton, I'll never forget. This is one of my biggest regrets in my whole Speedway career. Mm-hmm. Was I had Dave Parry from Parry International Coaches. I went to his house with my ex-partner Jill at the time, mm-hmm. and they wanted me or us to move down south to Wolverhampton to be closer, because obviously they thought I had potential in my career.
Okay.
And Peter Adams goes on about this as well, and I didn't take them up in that offer. They were going to put me up, like Dave Parr, he had a flat and stuff like that. I could have stayed there easy, but I took the option of staying north and having my job at Dixon's Buses and my partner Jill, and I never took that opportunity to go down south and give it a right good bash. And that's my biggest regret in my whole Speedway career. I wish I had done it.
Interesting.
Again, it might not have worked out. It might have broke me as a Speedway rider. So you can't really think that way, regret-wise. So, but anyway, sorry.
No, not at all. And then beyond Glasgow, so you reunited with Glasgow between 2000 and 2004, and then you went a wandering again, but still in the northeast to Newcastle, and then on to Redcar for a few seasons.
Yeah, no, the 2 years I had at Newcastle, the first year at Newcastle, I had Roy Clark working mechanic for me, but honest to God, what a year we had there. That was absolutely phenomenal.
Did you understand each other?
Oh, hi. We had some great banter. Okay, then that's what he used to say to me all the time. What do you call it? Shane Parker was at Glasgow that year, and he was racking up maximums. And my stepbrother Paul McLaughlin, he was mechanic for him. Mm-hmm. And I was getting maximums at Newcastle most weeks as well. And we had this competition to see who could get the most maximums that season. And Shane pipped me. He got 13 and I get 11.
What was the prize?
Probably just a bottle of Jack Daniels or something like that. But no, that was a great year. I love Newcastle. I love the track. And any time I went to Glasgow, I done great as well.
And I think James, having spoken to some Diamonds fans over the years, some Redcar fans, they remember you fondly as a fully fledged rider of theirs during those seasons. They rated you.
I think I'm one of these riders that I'm a kind of team man. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't like an individual man, and no disrespect to the top riders and that. I don't think they care less if they win a meeting or not, as long as like you were saying earlier on about the money. I think they just turn up, want their money and go. For a lot of them probably won't. They'll like the team to win, but for me, I thrived on winning with my team. Do you know what I mean? I loved it, and socialising with the crowd. I mean, I was in the bar every week at Newcastle, and me and Graham Coleman, we used to be the last out the bar at most tracks when he was mechanic for me. And it was the same with Roy. When we go anywhere, we'd be last out the bar. So you get sponsorship and all that sort of stuff as well. If you go in the bar, you talk to somebody, you might, do you know what I mean? So it's always good to go and socialise and do you know what I mean? Give back to the fans what they give you.
Yeah, and that's something I think that a lot of Speedway supporters, like about Speedway. It's more accessible. The riders are accessible. You can mingle with them. You can't really do that at football and rugby,
No, but
etc.
again, that's dying away. At Speedway, what I've heard, a lot of the riders don't go into the bar anymore. They just get in their van because they're racing maybe the next day, or they just, I don't know. I reckon it should be in their contracts that they need to go into the bar. Do you know what I mean?
And then, and I'm just thinking, James, you know, your wanderlust appeared to have evaporated, because after a couple of years at Newcastle, a couple of years at Redcar, you did come back to Glasgow once again. Was working with Stuart Dixon a factor? Was he always trying to get you to re-sign for the Tigers?
Aye, well, obviously Stuart. I worked with Stuart. Do you know what I mean? And I had a great relationship with Stuart. And obviously he knew how to pull my strings. Do you know what I mean? Like, and what to offer me. Do you know what I mean? He knew what I was getting, so he could obviously maybe offer me a wee bit more or whatever. And do you know what I mean? But obviously my heart was always at Glasgow. I mean, Glasgow is my local club. I watched them when I was growing up, so you're always tempted to go back to your home club. Do you know what I mean? Or I was anyway, and I just felt.
Do you ever find that harder, James? You know, is racing for your hometown club and knowing all of the supporters out in the terraces, did that make it any harder for a homegrown rider?
I think, no disrespect to the home fans and stuff like that, but I think a lot of the time the home rider doesn't get as much as the foreigner riders. You'll get a lot of foreign riders coming over, and you'll get a lot of the wee groups maybe want to sponsor them, but the local riders didn't really get that. No disrespect, a lot of people did help me. I mean, help me out. Do you know what I mean? But just what I've noticed, do you know what I mean, in my career, that the local boy just get maybe taken for granted a wee bit. Do you know what I mean? And never got as much as the kind of.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, interesting. Listen, let's have another look at you in action. This time around the Ashfield circuit, around circa 2010. I think this clip is, and you're up against one of your old sides, Newcastle Diamonds.
Line up for heats number 12, sponsored by Mel Coleman Strathclyde Training Services. For the Tigers in red, James Grieves. In blue, Ross Brady. For the Diamonds in green, Christian Henry. And in yellow, Jamie Robertson.
Marshall brings the riders into line for heat number 12. Green lights on. Away. It's arriving green. Christian Henry makes a great start round the outside of the Tigers pairing, with Jamie Robertson there up the rear. Grieves giving chase now to Christian Henry. Henry coming down home straight for the first time. Grieves going wide, trying to get more drive and duck. Coming off the pitch turn. Still Henry in front. Ross Brady still in third place, comfortably in front of Henry. Looking around to see where Grieves is. He does enough just to keep in front of Grieves. Grieves going down the outside again, coming off the banking. Challenging now round the outside of Christian Henry, cutting back to go on the inside. Henry kind of locks up slightly, and Grieves is through into first place. Cracking race this. Henry going round the outside, and Grieves just blocks the move. And this is James Grieves at his Ashfield best, coming down to take the flag. A welcome win for Grieves, a 4-2 for the Tigers.
Official result of heat number 12. A brilliant win for the rider in red, and a crucial win for the rider in red. For the Tigers, James Grieves, his winning time 59.8. 59.8. Second in green for the Diamonds, Christian Henry. Third in blue for the Tigers, Ross Brady. A 4-2 to the Tigers makes the score 35 to the Tigers, 37 to the Diamonds. The winning time again 59.8.
There you are, James. That's typical James Grieves to me. You know, you were quite a good gaiter in your day, but when you didn't make the gate, my goodness, you know, you and Shane Parker had this ability to chase down and make passes on people, and that's what you did there to Christian Henry.
Aye, no, I loved, as you said, towards my end of my career, or halfway through my career, I was probably a better gaiter for some reason. At my beginning, I wasn't a great gaiter, but when I didn't make the gate, I was always taught never to give up, and I hate seeing riders at the back that just give up after a couple of laps when they're quite far behind, because you never know what will, I mean, you get 4 laps to try and pass somebody, or somebody in front of you might break down. So you just don't know. So my mentality was just to go for it every lap, do you know what I mean, and try and win heats, do you know what I mean? That was what you're there for, to try and win races.
And you might have been coming towards the end of your career as it became, of course, but 2011, and you touched on it already in this interview, was a very successful season for the club. It was a surprise to me personally. I didn't think that team at the start of the season had league title winners written all over it, but I think there was a couple of changes came into the team, if I remember correctly. Nick Morris, of course, was making his name at the time, and in came league title number 3, James.
Aye, well, if you go back a year to 2010, that was the year that it was you had Joe Screen and what was the Australian?
Travis McGowan, you think of him?
Travis McGowan. That's when you had them in the team, and I think I was in the team. No, Joe wasn't in the team at the beginning. It was me and Travis, and I crashed, and I thought I'd broke my foot, and Glasgow replaced me that night with Joe Screen, and obviously there was a lot of talk about averages getting doctored in that at Edinburgh, blah blah blah. But that was obviously after that, halfway through that year, or towards the end of that year, I went back to Redcar, and it wasn't a great year. That was probably one of the years that I didn't enjoy, to be fair. I had a horrible year that year, and it wasn't the same going back to Redcar, and I only had a handful of good meetings there at the end up, and then I crashed at Scunthorpe, and I just packed it in then, and then that's when my head started thinking. I was on a kind of downward spiral, and then obviously during the winter, Glasgow came back in for me again and said, look, sign, and they were going to change the track, in which they did, and that helped. Obviously that'll be me working at Stuart Dixon's place. He used to maybe do a couple of jobs in the morning in the buses, and then he'd be like, right, you go up to the track and help out. And it was Nan and Donald Ross. The referee, Scottish referee, no Jim McGregor, the other one. Well, he was helping up there as well, so I would go up and help them. And when the track was getting all changed, and when I was there helping, and I seen the shape, man, I was like, this is going to be absolutely awesome. Do you know what I mean? And it turned out it was. I loved the change. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the old track, but I liked the new track as well. And there was a big hole going into the third bend, and when we all got used to it that year, all the away riders hated it, and they always used to get into trouble at that corner. And obviously word of mouth get back to folk, oh, Glasgow track's rubbish now, it's got big holes and blah blah, but we liked it. We knew where to ride, and we knew how to ride it. And even like Gary Havelock, who ex-world champion, quality rider, he came up and came off at that corner one day, hated it, do you know what I mean? So it was all that season. From there on, we just knew that it was going to be a good year, do you know what I mean?
But to be fair, to win league titles, as Edinburgh fans keep reminding me, you've got to win meetings away from home as well, and Glasgow were well capable of doing that season.
Oh, yep. No, we did. I mean, again, we trounced a few clubs away from home, like Leicester. We actually annihilated them one meeting away from home. I can't remember many more offhand. Do you know what I mean? But that was one that stuck out in my mind. That's the one that I got a 15-point maximum.
James, we won't dwell on, you'd done a couple of seasons beyond that, and 2013 was your final bow in Speedway. It wasn't a particularly good season for Glasgow, which is why I'm not going to talk about it very much, but your mind was made up presumably during that season, and there was only going to be one decision come October.
Aye, but if I knew now, if I knew that, let's say, Jerry Facena and that were going to take over, and I didn't have my illness, it's all if and buts, I would probably have maybe stayed on, do you know what I mean, a couple of more years. I'd love to have, do you know what I mean, because obviously new directors and or new owners with a new mindset for Glasgow, it might have helped me as well, do you know what I mean, and give me a good spur on, but it wasn't to be, and it wasn't.
Never know.
No, and it was in my head that I was going to finish that year, and I did. Do you know what I mean? So it wasn't a great year, but again, as you said earlier on, I was still scoring no bad points, and I finished off the season. I think I finished off with a maximum against Plymouth.
I remember.
And then we went to Edinburgh in the Scottish Cup, and we just pipped them. We beat them. We beat them there, and I think I top scored with like 13 or something like that, I'm sure. So I finished off on a high. Do you know what I mean? So that was the main thing. And I think what was my last meeting against Plymouth.
I think that was the last league meeting, if I remember correctly. The last competitive meeting, yeah.
Was I? So to finish off with a 15-point maximum against Plymouth at Ashfield, I mean, that just summed it up for me. Do you know what I mean?
Did they have Ryan Fisher in their team at that point? Am I right?
Yeah, they did. I think they did. Well, no, there's a name, man. Ryan Fisher. Had some battles with him, man. What a rider he was to race against.
He didn't give an inch, did he, Ryan?
No. Again, brilliant. Do you know what I mean? Like, to ride against these kind of guys, like tough opposition. It spurred you on. Do you know what I mean? You wanted to beat him. He was like the villain. You know what I mean? So you wanted to beat him. Do you know what I mean? He was a great rider to chase. Do you know what I mean? Or to want to beat him.
He's one of these riders you wanted in your team. You wanted him to be a teammate and not be racing against you. James, let sit back for a second. Let me read out just a few accolades, and I'll ask for your thoughts on them. 14 seasons with Glasgow, and that's the same, if I'm correct, as Steve Lawson managed. And Steve, quite rightly, is called Mr. Glasgow for his loyalty. You matched him season for season. The second highest all-time point scorer for the club in 75 years. You won more team honours than any other Glasgow rider in the club's history. Inducted to the club's Hall of Fame, and the only rider with a lifetime achievement wall, which to this day stands at Ashfield in your honour. That's not bad, James, is it? That's not bad to reflect on. What's your initial thoughts when you think back and reflect on all that?
I'm quite honoured. Do you know what I mean? I'm quite humbled at when they said to me about the wall thing, I was like, you sure? A wall with bricks for me? Do you know what I mean? Like, again, I'm quite modest. I'm not one for kind of showing off too much, you know what I mean? But I was quite honoured that I was going to get a wall, people buying bricks, and I think it's quite. It's a lot of bricks have been sold. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm quite. Again, I think I underestimated my whole self. I wish I knew back then, or had the confidence back then through my career what I kind of have now. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes that just comes with life experience, James, and I kind of recognise personally what you're talking about. I wasn't the most confident guy. I'm still not, but things have got a bit better as I've got older and grumpier, I think is the reason for it. James Grieves, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit down at long last and have a bit of a chat with you. I hope you enjoyed that little trail back through, and it was a bit of a gallop through your career. We've probably got a part 2 in this if you want to come back and talk to us again in a few months' time. And most importantly, look after yourself and your family, and we're going to take you up on that newfound enthusiasm to perhaps get involved again in Speedway in some shape or form. And we look forward to seeing you at Ashfield, and we'll stick a microphone under your nose in 2021. How about that?
Yep, definitely. No, I'll definitely come along, do you know what I mean? Because obviously we're not starved this year at Speedway, so at Glasgow, so I'll definitely come next year. And you never know, my boy he'll be 14 next year, so he might be having a skid round there, so we'll wait and see.
Let's make it happen, James. Meantime, look after yourself. Thanks very much for your time.
Yep, thanks very much for having me.